Welcome to G-Man Gaming and Reviews. Today's video is going to be a general overview guide to all the heroes of Sentinels of Earth-Prime. Since Handelabra Games is not going to be making any more things for Sentinels Digital for Earth-Prime, I thought this would be a great time to do an overview to all the heroes of Sentinels Earth-Prime, like I did for the Sentinels of the Multiverse, which you will see a card appearing on screen. If you haven't seen that video, you're welcome to go watch that as well, because that's an overview of all the heroes of Sentinels of the Multiverse. But today we're talking about Sentinels of Earth-Prime, so let's get started. So we're going to do them in the order that they appear. So first we're going to talk about Bowman, right? So Bowman is a generic, not generic, but he's a damage dealer, right? Now, the thing that makes him interesting is that there's multiple different ways to play him depending upon which powers you want to focus on. So he's got some cards like Knocked and Loaded that allow you to discard an arrow and then to deal one projectile damage at the end of your turn. His base power deals up to 3 targets 1 projectile damage each. He also has a wide variety of different damage types, which actually makes him very useful for if you're dealing with enemies that have invulnerability to particular damage types. So he's a very interesting character. But the thing that makes him, he's a generic damage dealer in the sense that he does a lot of different types of damage, but really you're going to be focusing around 3 main abilities. So you're either going to be using speed shooting to play up to 3 arrows, or you're going to be using Knocked and Loaded in comparison to, so he's going to be doing, he's got a lot of different sources of damage. So when you're playing him though, you're sort of going to be deciding as to whether or not you want to do speed shooting or you want to use his base power to do up to 3 targets 1 projectile damage each. He really does like anybody who can buff his damage, including Legacy. He really likes Legacy because he has a lot of instances of 1 damage, and so as a result of that, yeah, he's a damage dealer. That's pretty much what he does. He's got a lot of different types of damage dealing. Like he can do some single targets, like with Acid Arrow, where he makes all damage dealt to a particular target irreducible. So he's quite a versatile damage dealer. Quick Draw Quiver is good because it gives him the power to draw 2 cards, and each time you discard an arrow, you may draw 1 card. But really, he just likes to get a lot of arrows in play. And he's a consistent damage dealer. He's probably one of the most versatile damage dealers that I've come across in the game, just because of what he does and how he can give himself irreducible, which is actually really good. And the fact that he has a lot of different damage types. One thing that I will say about him though, is one thing that can be problematic is if you're dealing with villains that have immunity to projectile damage. Because even though he has a lot of different arrows that do a lot of different type of damage, the main damage that he does is projectile damage. So that is something to keep in mind when you're playing with him. But he's a very straightforward damage dealer. He has some utility, but really, like I said, you're going to be revolving around speed shooting, Knocked and Loaded, and his base power. So let's move on to Captain Thunder. Now, Captain Thunder is where we start to get a little bit interesting, in that a lot of the heroes in Sentinels of the Earth-Prime tend to do more than one role. And you see that with Captain Thunder, right? So his base power is, he's sort of a mix of team support, damage dealer. That's really what he does. So his base power allows him to deal 1 lightning damage, and another player may play a card now. So he sort of like oscillates between helping the team and doing damage, right? So he has a few cards that allow him to tank. You know, like there's this one here which makes him invulnerable to damage. And then he has another card called Charged Field. No, not Charged Field. Where is it? Energize. Charged Field? No. There's one card that directs all damage to him, which I can't remember. I think, is it Shocking Rebuke? Yes, it gives this one. So a lot of the times when you play this character, you want to play the combination of Implacable Resolve and Shocking Rebuke, so you can have one turn where all non-hero target damage is dealt to Captain Thunder and he's completely immune to damage, right? He alternates between tanking to some extent, but really one of the main things about playing with him is he's got a lot of ongoings, and you want to have as many of his ongoings in play as possible. So the one card of highlight with him is Ionized Atmosphere. So what it does is, at the end of your turn, you can draw a card or play one card, and if you do neither, he deals non-hero 2-target lightning damage and then destroys this card. So really, you want to have this card in play as quickly as possible, because the extra drawing it's just so useful. Basically, one of the really good things about Captain Thunder is he's mostly self-contained in that because he has such good card draw, right? And as you can see here, because he has such good card draw, it means that he's pretty good at getting himself the cards that he needs, right? So that's one of the things that's really cool about him. But like I said, he's sort of like, he does a bit of healing. Each hero target regains 1 HP, 1 player. But like I said, he's sort of a combination of a little bit of a tank, team support, and a damage dealer, right? So in the Sentinels of Earth-Prime, there are no real tanks, right? If you want tanks, you'll have to go to the previous game. But the fact that he can alternate here and there means that he's good as a secondary tank, but he's mainly a damage dealer, right? He has a lot of ongoings as well, like Lightning Force and Thunderclap, that really he just Storm Strike, that he just wants to have a lot of ongoings in play. And as you can see here, he has cards like Static Response, which actually works really well, because the first time he's dealt damage by each non-hero target, he deals 1 target 1 lightning damage. So when you combine that with things like Shocking Rebuke, he's sort of a weird mix of a tank, damage dealer, team support, especially when it comes to drawing cards. Charged Field is pretty interesting because it reduces damage dealt to hero targets other than Captain Thunder by 2, so he does have quite a lot of tanking ability, but it's more situational than, say, ongoing tanks like Legacy or I think it's the Sentinels. So yeah, he's sort of like, he's a temporary tank. He's going to be tanking some turns, doing damage, but that's pretty much what he is. He's primarily a damage dealer, team support, and also a little bit of tanking. Next, we're going to move on to Daedalus. Now, Daedalus is primarily a damage dealer, but he has a really unique mechanic. So he revolves around how many cards he has in his hand. So a lot of his abilities do damage. Like, for instance, Anti-Grav Field. Let me have a look here. So, for instance, Force Wave Doru deals up to 3 targets 2 energy damage. And then you've got one here, which is it Anti-Gravity? Atlas Gravity Well? That one deals each non-hero target 2 energy damage. So the thing is that Graviton Cannon, so this one deals 1 target 5 energy damage. So the thing about playing Daedalus is that he's mainly a damage dealer, but the thing about him is he's all about opportunity cost, right? So you can pretty much have him he can pretty much be the damage dealer that you want him to be, irrespective of whether it's dealing lots of damage to multiple targets or big damage to a single target. but you have to pick with him. You can't have both, right? So the mechanic that he works around is the fact that most of his cards have this little thing up the top here where they says, at the end of your turn, if you have 7 or more cards in your hand, Daedalus deals himself 4 fire damage and then destroys this card. So that this prevents you from having too many equipment cards in play. So when you are using him, you want to get a lot of his ongoing cards into play, and you especially want to get the Icarus into play if you can get it. The reason being is that his ongoing card heals him, and so the way that he works is he really doesn't have a lot of power cards, right? Most of his cards automatically take place at the end of the turn. So what that means is that most of your time what you're going to be doing is playing one of his equipment cards that does damage, and then you're going to be using his power to discard 2 cards. Now, with Daedalus, when you're playing him, the game is going to ask you if you want to draw a card. Most of the time you should say no. Because when you have an equipment card in play, most of the equipment cards will allow you to draw more cards. So really, the good thing about Daedalus is that he can pretty much transition to being whatever sort of damage dealer you need him to be. But you've got to manage his hand, which means he's not really a hero that I would recommend for beginners, because the fact that you have to really pay attention to what you're doing with him. He's not a super hard character to understand. You just need to manage your hand. You also need to understand that you're never going to really be able to have lots of equipment cards in play. There are some combination of equipment cards that you can have, but for the most part, you're going to be having... For instance, you could have Force Wave Doru and Matter Collapser in play and use both of them if you have something that gives you an additional power, which I think one of his abilities does. Let me have a look. Can't remember. But the point is that for them... Oh, actually, it's this one. It's the Icarus. So the Icarus gives you an additional power. So the point is that like it's more about knowing which cards you can play and which cards you need to get rid of. So that's the thing that makes him like he's not really super hard to play. It's just that you always have to be incredibly careful with him, because if you're not paying attention, you could easily have your equipment cards kill you. So that's the thing. He's a very versatile damage dealer. But the thing that's kind of annoying, the thing that's good about him is because he draws so many cards, most of the time you're going to have the cards that you need to do what you need to do. Like I said, you always want to get the Icarus into play. There's no disadvantage to getting this into play. His ongoing is good. This one is good. If you actually have the Icarus in play and you get Icarus Bombardment, you're laughing. But I think one of the things about him is it's normally very hard to get. For some reason, I can never get this Icarus card into play early. But yeah, like I said, he's a damage dealer. So this card here is very interesting because it allows you to discard all but 4 cards in your hand. But for the most part, he's really just a damage dealer, right? He does have some interesting cards, but for the most part, you're just going to be using him to do damage. So he's pretty a versatile damage dealer. One of the things that's good about him is that if you're dealing with villains that have immunity to projectile damage and melee, he's a really good choice because all of his damage is either energy or fire. So in that respect, he's actually really good. He does work well with Ra, because I think Ra has the ability to boost fire damage. The next one is Dr. Metropolis. Now, what Dr. Metropolis likes to do is to get lots of targets into play. So he's all, you know, he does have a unique ability to control the environment deck, but, you know, which is very interesting. Like, his controlled demolition can actually be very powerful under certain circumstances, because when he destroys an environment card, it does nothing, which can actually be really powerful, because there are certain environment cards in the game, when they get destroyed, they have horrendous effects. But for the most part, he's going to be getting his location cards into play, which are targets. One other good thing, he works really well with the Sentinels, and he also works really well with Unity, because he gets a lot of targets into play. It means that the enemies who target low HP targets are most likely going to be targeting his location cards, which are basically like targets, and they won't be targeting the Sentinels. So, but for the most part, what he likes to do is he likes to get location cards into play, and then for the most part, he does two things. He does damage, and he controls the environment deck. He's really good at controlling the environment deck. So as you can see here, he also has a little bit of deck control. The first time any location or environment card enters, you may reveal and replace the top card of the villain deck. So he does have a little bit of deck control, but for the most part, he's going to be doing damage via his location cards, right? So that's pretty much what he does. He's a damage dealer, he gets lots of targets into play, and he's really good at controlling the environment deck. The next one is Eldritch. He was released on the DLC. He's a level 3 character, but he's really not that complicated. In relation to how he plays, he's very similar to Night Mist from Sentinels of the Multiverse. He pretty much does a lot of everything. He does damage control, extra power use, extra drawing. But the balancing feature of him is that he can't do everything at the same time. So the way that it works is that he plays around tokens. So what happens is, you'll see here that you have Spell Adept, Spell Cantrip, Spell Master. So what that means is that the cantrip spells provide an additional bonus. So for instance, this one allows him to draw another card. This one allows him to use an additional power, and so this one allows him to play another card, right? So basically, the cantrip cards don't require tokens to use, and they give you additional benefits for having them in play. The Adept and the Master cards require tokens to use. So what happens is, for instance, if we look at Illusions of Eidolon, it's an Adept, which means at the end of your turn, you may remove 2 tokens from this card if you do reveal the top and bottom cards of one deck. So this one allows him to control the villain deck. This one allows him to have 3 players, including himself, use another power each turn. This one does 6 irreducible damage to one target. So basically, he pretty much does it all. He has the ability to destroy in ongoing an environment. So he does everything. One thing to note about him is when you're playing him, you want to prioritize getting cantrips and relics into play, right? The Adept cards and the Master cards you have to have tokens on them to make use of their abilities, but the equipment cards and the cantrip cards don't, right? So you want to get his relics into play as quickly as possible, and his cantrip cards, and then what you're going to be doing is you're going to be deciding what you want to do with him. Maybe you decide that you want to have him use this card and have other players use powers, or maybe you decide that you want to have him allowing other characters to draw cards. So he's a very versatile character. He does do it all for the most part, except for healing. He doesn't heal. But the thing about him is you just have to decide what it is that you want to do with him. But he's quite self-contained in that because he has these cantrip cards, he doesn't really have too much trouble finding what he needs to find. A lot of the times you just want to get his relic, especially this card here. This card is the one that you want to play early on if you get it, because it allows him to, one, destroy a spell to get 3 tokens, and it allows him to draw 2 cards and play up to 2 spells. So this card is going to get his economy going. But really all his relics are very good, and all his cantrips are very good. So really, you're just going to be deciding what you want to do with him based on what it is that you want him to do. He does it all, but it's just deciding what it is that you want him to do. Now, one thing that I will say that I said about Night Mist in the previous Sentinels of the Multiverse video is that while he does have the ability to do deck control, because it's dependent on a card that you have to get, I wouldn't take him as the sole deck control, just because you can't, especially in higher difficulty villains, you can't guarantee that you're going to get. One of the things about him is he has a slow start. His base power does allow him to draw an additional card, but really, until he gets this card in play, your economy is going to be quite slow. So you're really looking to get this card in play as quickly as possible, and then the cantrips, and then at that point you're just going to decide what it is that you want him to do. And then he does it all. He can destroy ongoing and environment cards. He really does damage to one target, damage to multiple targets. He can prevent the first damage dealt to that target each turn. So he really does do it all. He just doesn't heal. But that's the thing, it's balanced by the fact that you have to decide what you want to do with him. So really you're just going to be moving tokens to where you want to use them, and then that's pretty much it. The next one is Johnny Rocket. Johnny Rocket is a very interesting character. He seems very simple, but there's a lot going on under the hood. He's sort of similar to Tachyon, in the sense that he tends to build up, but one of the different things about him is he tends to play in bursts. So what he likes to do is he likes to use cards like Fast Footwork to get lots of cards into play, and then what he likes to do is use his other one-shot cards to destroy these momentum cards for effects. He does have some really interesting things. For instance, Distracting Chatter allows him to stop a target from dealing damage, which can actually be incredibly powerful. His card Rapid Retrieval allows him to search another player's deck for an equipment card. This is very powerful, especially with characters who really want a specific equipment card in play, like Legacy or Eldritch. This is an incredibly powerful card, right? But mainly he focuses on doing damage. He does have an interesting card by the name of Short-Term Solution, which will move one card under the top card in deck, which can give you an extra chance to deal with a card, which is very interesting. So it's a little bit of deck control. But for the most part, he just tends to do damage. So he's pretty simple to play. He has cards like... He also has a little bit of deck control with his Fleeting Mockery card. But for the most part, he's a damage dealer. His base power allows him to play a card or draw a card. So really what you're going to be doing is having one turn where you build up a big hand of ongoing cards, and another turn where you just do a whole bunch of damage. The next one is Lady Liberty. She's pretty interesting. She revolves around healing, team support, and damage. So healing, deck drawing, and damage. So she has some interesting ongoings. For instance, Unshackled Resilience means that she can't actually be prevented from dealing damage, which is very interesting. She's really good with Lantern Jack, which is the next character. She's not as... So in comparison to, say, Dr. Medico from Sentinels of the Multiverse, she's not as good as healing at him, but she's a pretty decent healer. So she alternates between doing damage and healing. She has quite a few ongoing cards, and she likes to get her ongoing cards into play. Almost all of her ongoing cards are actually really good. So yeah, like really, the one thing that I will say about her though is that all her damage for the most part is melee damage. She can be a little bit, if you're playing against villains that have immunity to melee damage, it might not be a good idea to take her unless you're going to focus on healing. Her base power allows a character each other character to regain 1 HP, and one player may draw a card. One good thing about her is if you're not using her to do damage, she can do a lot of team support. Like she's not as good at healing as Dr. Medico, but she's really good at helping people draw cards, right? A lot of her abilities allow her to help the team draw cards. So the point is that she's like a combination of a team support and a deck, and it helps players to draw cards. So yeah, she's an interesting combination, but she's not. Her healing isn't as like super power. If you're after really powerful healing, I would suggest Dr. Medico, but she's an interesting character. That being said, what I said about the melee before is a little bit wrong, because if you have Unshackled Resilience in play, she could deal damage even if somebody has immunity. But she doesn't, depending upon whether or not you're focusing on drawing on herself or on other players, on other heroes, you might not be able to get this card into play, to be honest. And if you don't get this card into play, then she's going to have a lot of trouble dealing damage to villains that are immune to melee damage. So good healing, good deck draw, and some damage as well. But she's really more of a team support that dabbles in damage rather than a pure damage dealer. The next one is Lantern Jack. Lantern Jack is pretty interesting. He has quite low HP, but he has the ability to increase his HP above his max. Basically, the thing about him is he's very much a team support and a damage dealer. When I say team support, I mean in the sense that he helps the team do damage, right? So he does have one card that acts like a tanking card. One of his really interesting cards is Banish Pretense, which makes all damage by hero targets irreducible and cannot be redirected. This card is very powerful, especially against certain villains like Apostate, who like to get relics in play. This card can turn the tide of damage, can turn the tide by itself. But for the most part, he's a damage dealer. You want to get his ongoings in play as quickly as possible, especially the ones that stay in play, because he has a lot of ongoing cards, and that's the thing about playing this character. A lot of the times when you're playing him, it's all about trying to get his HP as high as possible while getting damaged. So he does like heroes that heal him. He also likes heroes that allow him to play to extra cards. But the thing is that he's mainly a damage dealer, but he's also a team support. He's sort of like Pass in the fact that he helps the team do damage. So that's the thing. Like, the only thing that I would say about him is be careful about taking him against villains that like to target the hero with the lowest HP, unless you're taking another hero like Legacy or like Doctor. What was the guy's name? like Dr. Metropolis, who likes to get lots of targets into play. Lantern Jack really likes characters who protect him. But the thing is, he's a damage dealer. He also has the ability to destroy ongoing cards, which is really useful, but he's primarily a damage dealer. He's a very good damage dealer. Most of his damage is radiant, and he's got some psychic and some infernal. The advantage of that is that most of the time he's going to get around damage immunity. There are very few characters in the game that have immunity to radiant, or infernal, or psychic. So he's a really good damage dealer in the sense that he's also, like, the Banish Pretense card really allows all damage passed except for immunities, right? So just by himself, just having this card can help him turn the tide of battle for your team, especially with other damage dealers. Like I said, he's always welcome in a team, and there's always something that he's going to be able to do. The only thing that I will say about him is he sucks at card draw. So you'll need to play, if you're going to play with him, you're going to want to play with other characters who help with card draw and who help with card playing. But really, the only thing that I will say is he's a little bit of an advanced character to play, and you sort of need to be careful on which sort of setups you play him in, because he can be taken out quite quickly if you're not careful. Next is Pseudo. Pseudo is a weird character because mainly what happens is he revolves around shapes. So what happens is he has multiple shape cards, and when one of these cards comes into play, it has an effect, and it also destroys another shape that comes into play. And when these cards come into play, they have an effect, right? So a lot of the times he's going to be changing shapes, and he revolves around changing shapes. So, you know, he's kind of weird in that some of the shapes do damage. Like Clobbering Arms does 1 target 3 damage. Barbed Spines deals 1 projectile damage when it comes into play, and each time Pseudo is dealt damage, he deals that target 2 melee damage. One thing that I will say about him is he has a ability called Mind Over Matter, which not only reduces psychic damage, but it changes all the damage that heroes deal to psychic. This card can actually be a game changer for certain hero setups or compositions, right? Especially if you're playing with heroes that only do melee or projectile damage. Looking at you, Expatriate, he can just change the game by allowing them to do psychic damage. Ra also does the same thing by allowing, but the big advantage of Mind Over Matter is that it's optional, right? They may change the damage to psychic, not they have to. The other card that I will say about him that's really interesting is he has a little bit. He's sort of like a melee character plus deck control. So the one card that is probably the one that's most interesting about him is Risky Impersonation. So what this card does is each time a villain card would enter play, Pseudo may deal himself 5 psychic damage. So he can literally stop, if you're playing it, he can literally stop a villain from being able to play a card, right? And if you're playing against the villain Metamind, it's incredibly useful. Because when Metamind flips, he plays a card every single turn. You know what I mean? It's quite damaging. But yeah, he's a weird character. Like, there's always going to be something that he can do, right? He has some deck control with perfect disguise as well. So he's sort of like pseudo deck. He's like deck control slash melee, right? He has some really good ongoing cards. Malleable Flesh, Gru Battle Shifter. So basically that's what he's going to be doing. Sometimes you're just going to be going through shapes because you can. And other times you're going to be staying in a shape. So this one only works when the card enters play. But this one actually stays as long as you don't change shape. So you could literally stay in this shape and take 5 damage to stop the villain from playing a card each turn, right? So this card is really powerful under certain circumstances, especially if he's getting healed. But for the most part, you're just going to be swapping shapes, and like for instance, each time you play a shape, you gain 1 HP, draw 3 cards. So he's pretty self-contained. This card here is actually really good. It's really good deck control, but you're not likely to be able to get it. So really, like I said, he's pseudo deck control and a bit of damage. But the thing that I would say about him is that mind over matter is actually really powerful under certain circumstances. So the other good thing about him is that he's really good with heroes who like to damage themselves, because each time a hero target deals damage, they can change the type of that damage to psychic, and he reduces the psychic damage dealt to hero targets by 1. He's actually really good with characters that damage themselves, like Night Mist and Lantern Jack as well. So he's a really interesting character, but I wouldn't take him as a main character, simply put because his mechanic revolves around changing shapes. So apart from, unless you want to stay in risky impersonation, you're not going to be doing the same thing with him every turn. And he has some shapes that are just really useless, like Insubstantial Transmutation, which, he draws a card, he draws a card, but he becomes immune to melee and projectile damage. Not really useful unless you've got some way of directing damage to him, which he has no way of doing that. So he has some cards like that that are just pretty much useless. But so basically what's going to be happening with him is you're going to be having turns where you just change shapes because you can. And then there's going to be other turns where he's going to be doing damage. Like, for instance, when this card comes into play, he's going to do 6 damage. 3 damage when the card comes into play, and 3 damage when he... So really, you sort of have to decide with him whether or not you want to bring another shape into play, or whether or not you want to just have a shape in play and have it do something, right? So do you want to do 3 melee damage each turn, or do you want to say... stop the villain from being able to draw a card? He's an interesting character, but I find that he's much better as a support character than a damage dealer. But one of the things that he would like is if he could have... So he might work with the Wraith, if you could direct damage to him, but the problem is that, like, most of the time, yeah, like I said, he's mostly a deck control character, but his mind over matter ability is actually really powerful. So there are certain setups where he's really useful, but he's one of those characters where he has some really powerful cards, and then he has other cards that are just not really that useful. But the thing about him is that because he has like ongoings like Malleable Flesh and Gru Battle Shifter, what that means is that when he changes shapes, he actually benefits from it. One of his best cards is Telepathic Coordination. Allowing each character to draw 3 cards is actually really powerful. This card can win games on its own. and can make him really useful, especially if you take it with characters that can allow him to draw cards from his trash. It's really powerful. But yeah, he's got some cards that are really powerful. This one here is actually really interesting as well. But for the most part, I tend to find that it's kind of he's one of these characters where he's got some really powerful cards, but overall, so you're gonna have turns where you're doing really powerful things with him, and then you're just gonna have other turns. Like for instance, Perfect Disguise would be good if you could use it every single turn, but unfortunately, it only works when the turn comes into play. That being said, characters that allow him to draw cards from the trash or ongoing cards from the trash, like the Visionary, are actually really good with him because they allow him to be a lot more reliable, because he basically plays around ongoing cards. So anyone who allows him to draw ongoing cards from the trash is going to be really useful, especially if you've had those ongoing cards destroyed and you want to get them back into play. The next one is the Raven. If you're thinking that she's like Wraith, she's not. She basically plays around two mechanics, which is getting lots of cards into play and then destroying them and gaining powers off destroying them. So she does a couple things. So the first thing you have with her is these tactic cards. And with these tactic cards, when they enter play, they do something. And when they're destroyed, they do something. And you can only have one tactic card in play at a time. So most of the time what you're going to be doing is you're going to be just drawing a tactic, playing a tactic card, and then she has a lot of equipment cards as well. Each of the tactic cards does something different. She's mainly a damage dealer. For the most part. She's got a little bit of deck control, but she's mainly a damage dealer. One of her best cards is Tools of the Trade, because it allows her to search the deck or trash for up to 2 tactics or equipment cards. She works really well with the variant version of Mr. Fixer, who likes to do damage and destroy an ongoing or an equipment card, because she actually benefits from her ongoing cards from being destroyed. Right? She's one of the few characters in the game that actually likes her ongoing cards being destroyed, which is kind of unique as a mechanic. But she's mainly a damage dealer. She does have a little bit of deck control with crime scene reconstruction, but for the most part, she's a damage dealer. She's very self-contained and interesting. She's got a lot of different types of damage cards. So she's got like this one, Sticky Bomb, that does good damage to one target. She's got Smoke Pellets that deals each non-hero target 1 damage, and then you can reduce damage by 2 for one hero target. So she's a pretty versatile damage dealer. The only thing that I would say about her is that one of the interesting cards is Gadget Belt. It allows you to, so you can use a power on an equipment card. It allows you to do additional damage. So she's primarily a damage dealer. She's a pretty good character to take if you're playing against a villain that likes to destroy cards, because she benefits from her cards being destroyed. So anyone who likes to destroy cards, she's really good with. She does have some equipment cards that stay in play, but really there's not too much to her. She's just going to be drawing cards. She's very difficult to stop, for a villain to stop her from doing things, because she's one of the few characters in the game that destroying her ongoings really doesn't stop her, and she has a lot of one-shots in play, a lot of one-shots like Tools of the Trade, that, especially this card, it just gets cards back into play, right? So she's very self-contained. She's a good damage dealer. If you're worried about like a character having all her cards destroyed, she's one of the few characters that really doesn't suffer from having her cards destroyed. Next, we're going to go to the Siren. So Siren she does a lot of things. The thing about her is that she has these weather effect cards, and you'll notice that most of them don't have limited. So what that means is you can play multiple of them. For instance, you can play both of these Balmy Breeze cards, and then at the start of your turn, each target regains 1 HP. So the thing about her is her damaging cards tend to do damage to all targets, including your heroes. So one of the things about playing her is you want to get this card into play as quickly as possible. The only problem with it is that, so you'll see here that when she plays lower of Storm and Sea, hero targets are immune to damage dealt by Siren. This is important because she has a lot of damage cards that deal damage to everyone, including the heroes. Right, so you'll see here, Crashing Tide deals each target 1 cold damage. Deals up to 3 targets 2 cold damage. Now this can actually deal damage to your own team. Oh wait, no, not that one. Where is it? Yeah, like this one. So the point is that like deals each target 1. So the thing about her is that she's really good at doing damage and controlling the deck. But the problem with it is she's like if you took Tempest and made him more reckless. So she's very, very good at doing damage to multiple targets and clearing the deck of enemy targets. But the disadvantage is that she deals damage to your own team. So if you want to play her, you probably want to take her with other heroes that allow her to draw extra cards. You want to get this card in here in play as quickly as possible. Where is it? Yeah, so really, in terms of herself, she doesn't really have a lot in terms of deck drawing ability. So you want to take her with characters that allow her to draw extra cards. One thing to keep of note in here is that this ability here, targets cannot regain HP. This is actually quite powerful under certain circumstances. So the point is that she does a bit of healing, but for the most part, she's a damage dealer. She deals each. So that's the point. Is that she's a damage dealer. She does lots of little sources of damage. So she's not an easy character to play. Especially, she's not a character that you can just come in and you have to really think about what you're going to do with her. And because she needs to get this card into play, and because she needs to actually have a lot of cards in play in order to be effective, you need to actually build a setup around her rather than just including her in a hero composition. If you're going to include her, you're going to build a composition around her. So you're going to have other heroes that either allow her to draw extra cards. So the Sentinels are really good with her because for most of the parts she tends to deal one target. She tends to do lots of little instances of damages, which the Sentinels would be able to absorb. So even if you can't get this card into play, you can take the Sentinels and they will tank the damage that she's dealing to hero targets. One thing that I will say about her, though, is that she does have this card, which is Battle Rhyme. All damage is irreducible. I don't know if I would play this card, though, because it doesn't stop immunities. So if you're playing as Legacy, he can still tank as long as he's immune to damage. But like I said, I don't know if I would play this card because there are times when you don't want damage to be irreducible. But it's useful to have it in your back pocket just in case you need it. It's a very powerful card. So that's pretty much what she does. She's sort of like Tempest. She's sort of like a more advanced form of Tempest. If she's got this in play, she's going to be healing. If she's got two of them in play, she's going to be healing she's going to be healing each target 1 HP. That includes enemy targets as well, but I mean, if you're doing damage, you can always get rid of this card. So the point is that, yeah, she's got one of those things where she covers the whole board with her abilities, and unless she's got Lower of the Storm and Sea in play, she's probably going to be hitting your own teammates. She does have the ability to destroy ongoing and environment cards, as well as in ongoing and environment cards. So, and she's got this card for deck control, which is okay. But the problem with playing this card is that most of the time with her, you're going to be wanting to play other cards. You're probably going to be using her base power to do damage. So she's a bit of a weird character. I would probably only take her if you are playing against a villain that likes to put targets into play, because of the fact that she doesn't do instances of big damage. So unless you're going to be playing Brittle Rhyme so that she gets past damage reduction, I don't know if I would take her. There's instances where she's very useful. She's not one of the characters that I tend to take a lot, just simply put because if you're going to play her, you sort of need to build a composition around her in order for her to be useful. You can't just inject her into a composition, because I've played games with her where she didn't really kick into it until towards the end, so it wasn't really useful. Like I said, she's a damage dealer. What's unique about her is that she has the ability to control the entire board, but you sort of have to find out how you're going to feed her cards. So a lot of times what she's going to be wanting to do is use these Storm Surge cards to draw as many cards as she can, and then she's going to have a turn where she just... Because the problem is, with Lower of the Storm and Sea, because you have to discard a card in order to keep it in play, if you want to play a card, you actually have to have 2 cards coming in, one to discard, one to play. So that's kind of the thing about her, is that you sort of have to manage her hand. Written by the Lower is actually really good as well, because she has power cards. Like I said, she's really just a version of Tempest that is really good at controlling the board, but you sort of have to be careful that she doesn't take out your own team. Next one is Star Knight. She's really there's some like complexity to her, but really she's just a damage dealer. That's pretty much it. The best way to think of her is like Knife from the Sentinels of the Multiverse. She does damage, she gets cards into play. The good thing about her is that she mainly does energy damage. So, because of that, she gets around... Her base power does melee damage, but for the most part, you're not going to be using the base power very long. So yeah, she's a straight-up damage dealer. She has some weird mechanics with... She's really good. She mainly focuses on doing damage to a single target. Sort of similar to Fnatic, but she's much simpler. She does have the ability to reduce damage dealt to her by 1, but for the most part, she's really good at just doing damage to one target. She does have Augmented Burst that does damage to a lot of targets, but you're not going to be able to get it into play at the beginning when you need it. So she's not a reliable deck clearer. She's mainly there for doing damage to a single target. She does have the ability to buff the damage that she does. So, yeah. She does have this mechanic about with the trash and moving cards to the bottom, but for the most part, I really don't tend to use it. I just tend to use her as a straight-up damage dealer. Just get her equipment and just start attacking. That's pretty much the way that she works. Like, sort of the Star Knight is what she wants in play. She has mechanics around destroying her own cards, but really for the most part, you're not going to be using it. She does have the ability to tank with Star Knight Oath, but because she only can reduce the damage by 1, and this one's optional, you may redirect it. So she's got quite a high amount of health in terms of 30 health. So she's really good at, so she's a really good character to take with, say, Lantern Jack, because she can protect him. But you don't want her tanking for the entire team, because she just doesn't have the ability, the cards to reduce a lot of damage coming in. This was G-Man Gaming and Reviews Guide to Sentinels of the Multiverse. Sorry, not Sentinels of Multiverse, Sentinels of Earth-Prime, the heroes. This was an overview of them. I'd like to hear your comments. I'm going to be moving back to doing guides to... I haven't finished the guides to Sentinels to the individual characters, so I'll be doing that when I get the time. Love to hear your comments on this one. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already done so. Love to hear what hero you'd like me to do an in-depth guide into. This was G-Man Gaming and Reviews Guide to Sentinels of the Multiverse. Sentinels of Earth-Prime. Sentinels of Earth-Prime. This G-Man's Guide to the Sentinels of the Earth-Prime. Signing off.